Whoso pulleth out this sword of this stone and anvil is rightwise king born of all England.
Except he's not, is he? Because we discussed in a video the other week, which you can watch here if you want, that Arthur probably was a sub-Roman Briton, and therefore definitely not English. But this week, in this video, which I definitely forgot to post on Monday, because I forgot it was Monday, because I am under mind-bending amounts of stress right now, we're going to look at his sword, Culhwch. Ha-ha! If you are a fan of King Arthur and the Arthurian legends, you will know that King Arthur's sword is called Excalibur, and he either pulled it from a stone, or pulled it from an anvil that was in a stone, or it was thrust to him by a watery tart. What we're going to do in this video is have a little dig into some of the places where Culhwch, or Caliburn, or Calibrun, or Excalibur is first seen, and see if we can dig through a little bit of this and make it a little bit clearer. So, let's jump in. So the first place that we have to look at is the first source, and we're going to look through this as sort of chronologically. The first source that we have that mentions Arthur having a sword is Culhwch and Olwen. Culhwch and Olwen is a story. It's part of Pedair Cainc y Mabinogion. It's part of the Mabinogion, and it is approximately from the 11th or 12th century. People thought it was a bit earlier than that. Modern scholarly research and reassessment seem to put it somewhere around the 12th century. The earliest copy of it we have is actually from about 1400, though. Yes, we've got an earlier fragment in a book called the Red Book of Culhwch, but... So, Culhwch is a young prince who has to do a load of seemingly impossible tasks. Very Herculean sort of formula here, to win the hand of Olwen, who is a princess, and these tasks are being set by her giant father, Ysbyddaden Pencawr, and the only way he can do that is with the help of his cousin, Arthur. So he goes to Arthur, who lends him his sword, and his sword is called Culhwch. He also gives him help in the form of knights, such as Sir Kai and Sir Bedwyr, Gwalchmai, and various other knights that we'll look at in another Arthurian video, if you would like me to say more sexy Welsh words. Oh, yeah. He manages it, by the way, and he marries Olwen and everyone's happy. Yay! So, very rare happy ending in a Welsh legend, actually. This is arguably one of the first Arthurian tales. We already looked at Nennius mentioning that there was an Arthur at the Battle of Mount Badon, but now we have an actual Arthurian tale with knights and Sir Kai and Sir Bedwyr and a prince going on a quest and a giant and the sword. So the sword in this instance is called Culhwch, and Culhwch in Welsh means hard, Caled, which is cognate with the Caled in Caledonia, so you're welcome. Bwlch means cleave or breach, or in modern Welsh, pass. So in modern Welsh, Culhwch literally just means hard pass. Do you want my sword? Hard pass. Alright, fine. Oh my god. I wanted to make that into a really bad joke, but we'll just leave it there. Leave me terrible hard pass jokes in the comments. So, that is the first time that we see Culhwch. It means hard cleave, like hard cleft, strong cut, basically. And that's not the only place we see this name. We also see this in Irish tales as well, where, Caled Bolg is the name for a sword. We also have it in an Irish retelling of the story of the Trojan War, where it's just used as kind of a generic term for mighty weapons, generally. So it seems to be that this hard cleft, this Culhwch, Caled Bwlch, before Lenitian takes over, is like a generic legendary name for weapons, for powerful weapons. I think that's rather cool. So, when does it get all of its magical powers? Well, not in Culhwch and Olwen. He gets the sword, and it's a damn good sword. It's meant to be like the best sword around, but it doesn't have any particular magical qualities. The start of it getting semi-magical qualities is with our old friend Geoffrey of Monmouth. Yay! In his 1136 Historia Regum Britanniae, History of the Kings of Britain, he gives Arthur's sword as Caliburnus, The Latinized version is Caliburnus. That's obviously where the name Caliburn comes from, which is still what some people write the name of the sword as. There's thinking that this comes from the Latin calibs, which is derived from the Greek calyps, or chalips, I should say, apologies to my Greek viewers, which means steel. So there's this idea that his sword's name means steel. If we're going with this explanation, okay, cool. But there's also a scholarly idea, that this is just an attempt to Latinize Caled Bulch. Not Caled Vulch, Caled Bulch. We have mutations in Welsh called lenitions, and a B turns to a V sound at various times. It's part of the complex grammar of my amazing language. But if it's Caled Bulch, and he's tried to Latinize it to Caliburnus, it's just an attempt to make it Latin. By the mid-12th century, so 10, 20 years after Geoffrey's written this book, it gets taken over to France. French writers are starting to work on it, translate it, turn it into verses, turn it into songs and poems, expand on the tales in some of it, just making stuff up, pulling it out of their bums. And one of the people who does this is a man called Wace, or Wake, and he writes down that the name of the sword is Calibrun, Chalibur, Calibor, Calibor, Caliborn, Calibrun, and Excalibur. See where it's going? By the end of the 12th century, Chrétien de Troyes has written Percival, as in Sir Percival from the Knights of the Round Table, and in that he says that Sir Gawain is carrying a sword called Excalibur, and that it is the finest sword in all of the land, and it cuts steel like wood. So this idea that Excalibur cuts wood cuts steel like wood, that it can slice through wood, that it can, it melts through steel beams like jet fuel, is taken by the author of a work called the Vulgate Merlin. It's Merlin, written in Latin, the story of Merlin, where he claims that the name Excalibur is a Hebrew word, which means cuts through steel and wood. So, by the 13th century, we've now got this established idea that King Arthur has a sword that is also carried by other people. He lends his sword to other people, including Culhwch in Culhwch and Olwen, and Sir Gawain, and that this sword has this amazing ability to cut through anything, basically. About 1200, this is when Robert du Boron is writing his Merlin, and this is where we get the origin story. This is where we get the story of where Arthur gets his sword from. So Arthur is made king of the island of Britain. He is made king of the Britons by pulling a sword from an anvil in a stone. So the stone, then there's an anvil, then there's a sword sticking out the top of the bugger. And this appears in a churchyard on Christmas Eve, and he yanks it out of the anvil and is made rightful ruler of all Britain. I mean, nice work if you can get it. That is sort of taken as his divine sign that God has put this challenge there, and this is his Gordian knot, and he has to untangle it. That's his thing. Only the true king can do that. Why is this to do with Merlin? It's because Merlin is the one who foresees this. So Merlin already has this psychic ability to tell the future and foresee things. He's a seer at this stage. We'll do a Merlin video, don't worry about it. That is then taken and included in the whole corpus of Arthur stuff. The Arthurian stuff includes this sword. Great, cool, very nice. This is Excalibur in some of the Merlins, and explicitly Excalibur in some of the Merlins, and in others it's just Arthur's sword. But it is made explicit that it's Excalibur at various points. This develops over the 13th century through the work of French writers into, he pulls this sword out, he becomes the king, then he breaks that sword, it snaps, and he needs to get a replacement. And if you've read Thomas Malory's The Death of Arthur, you'll know that he snaps it in battle with King Pellinore, and Merlin, Merddin, Merdinus, Emrys, whatever you want to call him. We're going to do a Merlin episode. I think we have to, right? We have to do a Merlin video. We're going to be calling them episodes like it's real TV. Anyway, Merlin takes Arthur and says, I can get you a brand new sword, baby. And Arthur goes with him to a lake. The lady of the lake appears, and she's like, what up? Got you a shiny blade. And Arthur's like, throw that blade at me, wet lady. And she kind of goes, not so fast, king friend. You have to do me a favour. And he's like, you got it, bro. Toss me that straight axe. And she gives him the sword, and that is Excalibur. So there's two separate swords here, where the first one is the sword in the stone, the sword in the anvil in the stone, properly, and then the second sword is Excalibur, that he gets from the Lady of the Lake. And that is sort of embellished by Thomas Malory in the 15th century in his English version of Le Mort d'Arthur, where you get, whosoever shall pull this sword from this anvil is rightwise King of all England. Yeah. And that is basically where it solidifies in the English literature that this is how Arthur gets Excalibur. So that is Excalibur. That is Caledwulch. That is Caliburn. And Malory, in his version, says its name is Excalibur or Caliburn. That is as much to say cut steel, because of this French tradition where the name of the sword means it cuts steel, which comes from the even older French version that says it cuts steel like it's wood. And a lot of this mythos with Excalibur effectively starts when Geoffrey of Monmouth gets his hands on it and tells us that this sword is something special. Another place where we start seeing some of the magical stuff coming in is from the Dream of Rhonabwy, which is written between the 12th and 14th centuries. In the Dream of Rhonabwy, I think it's being carried by Gawain at this point, or someone, but whenever you pull Excalibur out of its scabbard, two chimeras on the handguard seem to breathe jets of fire, so it's this really difficult, like, oh my god, it's so bright, I can't even look at it, weird magical effect that this sword has, as well as it being a super sharp blade, obviously. It has all of these weird properties. Later on, the scabbard is meant to have magical properties as well, so the scabbard of Excalibur is meant to prevent anyone who's wearing it from bleeding if they're wounded in battle, so you can prevent someone dying. And some of the later high medieval stories have Arthur dying because he loses his scabbard. There are stories where Sir Gawain finds the scabbard and then wears it and is prevented from dying whilst battling Mabon the Enchanter in the fairy world and that kind of stuff. And this is where the fairy world stuff comes in. All of the mystical wooey-woo fairy witchcraft, Tir nach Noch and all of that kind of weirdness, Morgana Le Fay and all that garbage, is all due to this romanticism and this fairy tale medieval stuff that is thrown in and embellished upon it all in the high medieval period. So there you go. That is effectively a little crash course on Excalibur, or Caledwulch, as we should all be calling it, not Excalibur. And I think it's really cool that in the Irish legends, there are swords called Caledwulch, and now in the Arthurian stuff, we have Caledwulch. And a lot of people think, and I think I agree with this, that the name Caledwulch, the name hard cleaver, hard cleft, is this trope name that you get in these legends, in Irish and Brittonic and, let's just call it Celtic fringe legends, where the legendary hero carries the legendary sword Caledwulch that is now the sole property of King Arthur, but once upon a time was just a sword carried by mystical legendary men. I think that's really cool, and whether that is just the typical name, or whether it's meant to refer to a single sword, is lost to the mists of time, and I like that. I like the stuff that is mysterious about Arthur and Excalibur. I think that's cool. There is mystery to this story. There is, weird stuff lost to the mists of time. I think that's super cool. Diolch yn fawr iawn, unwaith eto am ymuno. Thank you so much once again for joining. Thank you to all of my new patrons. You guys are amazing. Thank you to all of the coffee donors who've been giving me lots of money recently to help me through the tough times. It's so incredibly valued and so appreciated. I really, really do appreciate every single one of you guys. Thank you so much, and thank you for being such a wonderful bunch of people on the internet. You guys rock. So, diolch yn fawr iawn. Thank you so much, and until the next time, hwyl am y tro. Bye for now. Put on a shirt and I made a cup of tea. Literally cannot get through shooting a single video without at least 2 or 3 cups of tea. I am just an addict. I have a problem that I don't want solved.